excited. Oh, I'm so excited that I get to say hello to Vimbo Watson today. Hello, Vimbo. Welcome.
Hello.
Yay! Hello. And we have what I think is an exciting topic today, which is the difference between grit versus toxic resilience. And so, before we get started on that, I just want to let our listeners know about your top five strengths. So, your top five strengths are activator, communication, competition, woo, and achiever. And hello, I am Tiffany Taylor, and my top five are input, maximizer, positivity, learner, and strategic. All right, so diving right in. First, I just want to ask, what are you passionate about, and what do you get paid to do?
Oh, I love it. That's a really good,
Mm,
really good question. I am very passionate about a couple of things come right to mind when I think of that question. One, I'm really passionate about gathering people. So whether it's in
mm,
my personal life, we love having friends over. If it's a holiday or if it's not a holiday, we just love hosting people. My husband and I both have a passion for this, so it's a fun thing we get to do in our
mhm.
household. So I love gathering people. I love hosting. I love creating events and experiences mostly because I really like people. I'm just an extreme extrovert. I'm a people person.
Yeah.
Once I heard this quote that was like, some people don't see any strangers in the world. Like everyone is just someone who doesn't know that they're your friend yet. And that is
Hmm.
my life. That is my experience. So I just love meeting new people. I'm very passionate about that. What I get
Yes.
paid to do. So my background is in education. I was a classroom teacher. I was an elementary school principal for a few years. And now I get paid to speak. I provide professional development for schools. I'm a military spouse. So I provide mental health and wellness workshops around topics like burnout, resilience, grit, all of these
Hmm.
words we like to use. And I
Yeah.
also do some contract work, just supporting people with mental health or education. So those are my jam. Those are things I love to do.
Yeah, yeah. So what I love too is when we first met, and we were talking about Clifton strengths, and the one strength that has stuck with you that you could recall instantaneously was woo. And so woo
Yeah.
is you don't know a stranger. And so I think that's, yeah, so that's very telling. But and I was like, I have to know what the rest were. Tell me, tell me what they are. And so as we have gotten to know each other and will continue to get to know each other, I'm really excited to see how your woo pairs with your other strengths in order to tackle some of these things that, like resilience, like grit. So I'm excited we're here to explore that. So, as a former military spouse, I will say my relationship with the R word, the resilience word, is rocky. I have, that is a word that I just, when I see it, I kind of like squint my eyes at it, like, ooh, here we go again, right? And I think that when I found, when I started learning more about the difference between grit and resilience and then toxic resilience, it really, it was resonating with me, my experiences. I feel, being a military spouse, especially, is an endurance sport. And so Angela Duckworth has this great book, Grit, and she says that in this book, she says that enthusiasm is common, but endurance is rare. And I think so that
Mm,
word endurance. So now when I've softened up to the word resilient. I used to think it was something that I had to earn. And now I am a true believer that it is something that I am. Like I believe it to be true
mm.
about myself, that I am resilient. And so I use my strengths to look for my resilience, right? Because I really do feel like my strengths help me highlight my resilience. But I will say that there is, and I'm very curious about your relationship with resilience and how you define for yourself that line between strong versus silently suffering, grit versus that toxic resilience where you're really burnt out or overwhelmed.
Yeah, I want to say, first of all, thank you for helping me dig back into my strengths because
Mhm.
just remembering what areas I'm like, okay, this is where I naturally shine and what I gravitate towards actually really helps me reflect on this question you've
Oh,
just
good.
asked. So I want to start by saying about resilience. I think resilience has really bad PR. The marketing is
Mhm.
terrible because
Yeah.
I think people, like you mentioned, in the military community, as military spouses, as military family members, sometimes, unfortunately, it's a word that's just kind of thrown out there, and we're almost
Mhm.
instructed to be resilient. And I think there is a picture of resilience people have, and I don't know that that actually
Mm-hmm.
matches what resilience actually is. So I think oftentimes when we hear resilience, at least for myself, I have thought in
Mm-hmm.
the past and associated it with like just marching on, kind of just like,
Yeah.
yes, you
Yeah.
didn't sign up for the military, but you are
Yeah.
also just taking orders and you're following
Mm-hmm.
orders and you're doing what's required. And not only are you showing up and doing it like, whenever you're asked, but you're doing it with a smile on your face. You're doing it without
Mm-hmm.
complaining. You never kind of break rank and say, ooh, can we even question why we're doing what we're doing if it's not absolutely
Mm-hmm.
necessary? And so I think in that way, I think that lends itself to the more negative aspect of what people push as
Mm-hmm.
resilience. And I think for myself, I've been on a journey in the last few years, especially I was an elementary school principal during a really difficult time when the world went virtual and our school went from
Mm-hmm.
being an in-person school to a virtual school. I learned a lot about resilience during that time because I think what happened in the world is a lot of us realized a few things are essential, whether it's in education or just our daily lives. And we really
Mm-hmm.
focused on the essentials. And resilience became more of the thought of how can we keep on showing up every day? Just showing up.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're not going to
Yeah.
dictate if you show up super happy and peppy, if you show up
Mm-hmm.
super excited and
Yeah.
enthusiastic, if you show up with
Yeah.
questions. Resilience is just, we have agreed that we are on the same team, whether, like I said, whether you're in an educational team or whether it's your family unit, whether it's your friendship group, whether it's a group at a nonprofit you're involved in, we are going to continue to show up and support one another when showing up looks like less than ideal. Like, you're showing up today
Mm.
and
Yeah.
maybe you aren't feeling whole and maybe you don't have peace because maybe your husband's deployed, or maybe
Yeah.
you don't have peace because you have a newborn baby and you were up all last night and you are just struggling to like make it through the day awake, right?
Yeah.
And so I really, there's this quote I really, really love from Brene Brown. I've read like a lot
Oh,
of her books.
yes. Yes. Yes.
She's amazing. She's an amazing
Mm-hmm.
author. She helped me start to break down my tough armor when it comes to resilience, and I
Mm-hmm.
want to be a strong person and show up
Mm-hmm.
perfect every day. And there's a quote she says where she talks about how we cannot selectively numb our emotions. We
Mm.
cannot, like, by numbing the bad, when we decide, I'm not going to name the fact that I'm sad today, I'm not going to
Mm-hmm.
name the fact that I'm, not at my ideal, we actually dampen the really high highs as well. So then you
Mm.
can't even
Yeah.
fully experience joy because you haven't recognized where you've dipped. And that is just,
Yeah.
every person has highs and lows. That's just being
Yeah.
human. And we don't want to become robots. So anyway,
Yeah.
that's my thought about for today.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I'm really glad that you said name. So, like, I think what for me, why Clifton Strengths and why I decided to dedicate my business into bringing awareness to Clifton Strengths, especially for women, is that ability to name your strength, name what's right with you. And I am so happy to hear that you naming your strengths is helping you gain insight onto the highs, the lows, all of that. And I mean, you have achiever in your top 5. So when you're sharing these stories about having to check your achiever and be like, I'm going to name this strength that's showing up for me, usually in a way to lift me up, to serve me. But if I'm in a season where I cannot be productive and check everything off the
Mm-hmm.
list,
Mm-hmm.
then how do I pair that with another strength to remind me that I'm still resilient? I'm still strong. So you're moving out of that space of shame for somebody that you are. And it's, yeah. So I'm really excited to hear that your strengths are a touchstone of you to kind of like reset and name things. Aside from woo, I'm curious. So when you went and revisited, because I know woo stuck with you, but what other strength in your top 5 stood out? And you're like, oh yeah, that's definitely has been showing up for me. Was it activator, communication, achiever, competition? Which one is showing up for you now?
I think both activator and communication. So I'll start with
Okay.
communication, actually. So I did a pretty, I don't want to say it's a hard pivot because communication
Mm-hmm.
is connected to being an educator in a school setting. Obviously, when you're leading
Mm-hmm.
a school, you're leading assemblies, you're,
Yeah.
drafting newsletters that the secretary puts out every week to the parents and things like that. But
Mm-hmm.
in my business now, what I do from day to day is I communicate, I support families who are oftentimes military families who are just navigating different educational changes that come along with moving a lot as military families, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I communicate a lot one-on-one and in smaller groups a lot of times, but then I also go out and I speak and I do keynotes or interactive workshops. And so I was
Mm-hmm.
very delighted to rediscover, like, yeah, I knew this was one of my strengths. And like just having it validated
That's
was
what that
very
is.
fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I also liked that it said writing too, because ever since I was young, I mean, I journal every morning. I have a prayer journal. I write in
Mhm.
every morning since 2012 faithfully. So it's been
Mhm.
years and years and years that I wake up every morning. I just write out my thoughts. It helps me clarify things. But I realized that even is a method. It's a strength, both how like I show up externally to the rest of the world, like it shows up
Mhm.
strong there, but it's also a strength internally. Like I have actually been sharpening my communication, I think, with myself in recent years, and just
Yeah.
getting really clear, really honest, really like, how are you? Like checking in with myself. So I think that's been a
Yeah.
beautiful thing. So yes, communication is definitely one I was like excited to see again. And then activator, lately I have a lot of friend groups, newer friend groups, like people I've been
Mhm.
getting to know in the area we live in. And one comment that has just kept coming up recently, which I'm like, huh, that's weird, is several friends have just off the cuff said, like, man, Vimbo, I love it because, I love being friends with you because when you say, hey, let's hang out, or you want to do something like, hey, let's go to a pumpkin patch, or in the spring, let's
Mhm.
go, flower picking or whatever it is, or in the summer, let's go fruit picking.
Mhm.
You make a plan, you send a text to the friend group, and here we are, at a
Yeah.
pumpkin patch or ice skating or whatever
Yeah.
it is. And
Yeah.
the weird, like, so for me, the weird thing is I sit down and I'm like, wait a second. I feel like I don't intentionally do that. It just naturally comes to me. That is just the way my brain operated, which I think
Yeah.
is the beautiful thing about naming our strengths, because recognizing that not everyone thinks like this and then trying to find their strengths, I think gives me more grace towards others. Because in the
Yes,
past,
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, I have found myself being very frustrated being friends with people who are not activators. I'm like, I don't
Yeah.
understand. We all just said we want to do this thing.
Yeah.
Why aren't we doing this thing? So
Yeah.
that's
There's not
that's
a
how it shows up in
win.
my
There's not
personal.
a win. It's now. Like activators and when are we going to do this? It's like we're doing it now. Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think, yeah, and giving grace. So I think that too is one of the things that really stuck with me about you, and I wrote this down for myself, is when I was around you, it was clear to me that the people are just as important as the work to you. And that to me is something rare. And that is something with activator. Like you have to have a very mature activator in order for that to feel true for the people around you. So you're doing this important work, but like what you just said about not only naming your activator, but claiming how it shows up for you. And then recognizing sometimes it shows up in a way that is it it can be a barrier. It can be a barrier to establishing relationships that are important to you or important to the work that you're doing. And so having that really mature activator where you're saying, and you're not defaulting, well, that's just the way I am. That's just my strength. That's just naturally how I am, right? Because that's easy to do, right? But I think for me, and what I've just been really taken aback by you in your resilience, is that the people around you are just as important as the work, and that you take time to name things, to claim them, and then make those adjustments of, okay, well, not when right now, but in the past, that if sometimes I move too quickly, and that can cause a disruption for others, right? So I think that's a beautiful thing. So I'm very curious if how your competition, how that has shown impaired for your strength, because I was surprised by that one. So when I was like looking, I was surprised, but then I stepped back and I was like, am I though? Like, because there's so many. So I'm just curious if there is an accomplishment that you have accomplished, and there are many. So you don't have to list them, but if you want to, it's your space, do it. But is there an accomplishment that you achieved where you were surprised yourself? Like, oh, or have you always had this like confidence that you were going to strive to achieve the best, be the best in what you were doing?
Well, so it's so funny that you say that because I think it's such a interestingly, I don't want to say dangerous. It's a very interesting combination of strengths I have. So I would be
Yes.
curious to know just statistically how many achievers are also like have competition as one of their strengths
Uh-huh.
because
Yeah.
it can get a little bit intense and you don't want to be a slave to the work. I have been through the burnout cycle myself, which is why I'm such an
Mhm.
advocate for burnout prevention and recovery now. Because if you're
Mhm.
not careful, that competition can drive you to working 24/7, never
Mhm.
resting,
Yeah.
never, ever, ever being done. And honestly, never enjoying the fruit of your labor. And so
Yeah.
in the last couple years, I feel like some of my proudest moments competition wise aren't necessarily the ones where outwardly looking you might be like, oh wow, that was like, so amazing. Like maybe it
Mhm.
wasn't necessarily my biggest paid speaking engagement or my largest
Mhm.
crowd, but I know last year I had the biggest honor of when you I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but like you apply for something but you're not quite sure like if you are qualified or if you're the kind of person that they're looking for a specific,
Yeah.
call. And so as a
Mhm.
speaker, I'm often going through this, but I've just, for whatever reason, maybe because of my strength, I have
Yeah.
adopted this like Delulu level of optimism. So even if there's something, if
Yeah.
there's something, I love that you work with women because I've read
Yeah.
statistics about how like a lot of times like men, if they're not qualified for a job, like,
Mhm.
they're not 100% qualified but they will still apply for it. Whereas women tend to statistically
Mhm.
look at a job application, want to make sure they're like over 100% qualified. And
Yeah.
even then they may not apply. So I am against like I am the anomaly in this, in that like I just have Delulu faith and optimism and like
Yeah.
excitement about my own skills. Like not in a, oh my gosh, I'm better than you way, but just in a like I've just
It's okay
developed
to
this strong
celebrate
sense of
yourself.
confidence.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And so last year I applied to speak at the Military Influencer Conference, and I
Mhm.
just, like I said, it was like, I don't know, because this is such a big thing. It's
Mhm.
such a massive event in the military community. And when I was accepted to speak, and I did a workshop, so it wasn't like on the main stage, but it was still
Mhm.
incredible to be in this smaller room with these military spouses talking about
Yeah.
burnout, talking about the application of this theory and these practical things, like these tools I know and that I give to other audiences all the time, but being able to like
Mhm.
give it back to my own community, that
Yeah.
felt like a really sweet, like that felt like a gold medal at the Olympics. Like that felt like
Yeah.
I'm in exactly the place I want to be at the right time, serving the people I've set out to serve.
Mhm.
So I guess in that sense, like I do compete externally. I'm not gonna lie and say like, "Oh, I'm never competing against other people." But a
Yeah.
lot of my
Mhm.
competition is like me versus me. It's like
Mhm.
me like trying to reach the goals I set on my own vision board, me trying to be better than I was a year ago or 2 years ago. That's a lot
Yeah.
of my competition these
Yeah.
days.
And I'm curious too if your because with competition and competition shows up for people differently who have so somebody who has competition in their top five, it's going to show up differently than it shows up for you. And so your report tells you your highlighted part, your report will tell you how specifically it shows up for you. But I am curious because within competition is the ability to not only see your own performance, but the performance of others. And so I can imagine how competition has shown up for you in the many roles you've had, especially in education, where you can see the performance and the potential in other people as well. And I think that that is, how, we've talked a lot about you and your relationship, your experience with resilience. How have you seen others' performance as far as resilience and how people are showing up to either build or accept their own resilience?
Yeah, so I think when I think back to just different roles I've had, or even the role I have currently right now in my own
Mhm.
business, when I'm looking at others through the lens of, yeah, whether it's their resilience or, and it's a little bit of a double-edged sword because sometimes you're looking at other people's example in real time as they're living their
Mhm.
life. And it's either an example of, ooh, I want to aspire for that, or it's an example of what not to do. And
Yeah.
actually, honestly, just because of the person I am, I tend to ask a lot of questions in relationship. So if I have
Mhm.
any relationship to you, even if it's very like superficial, we've just met, we're more of acquaintances than anything,
Mhm.
I might sit down with you and say like, hey, I noticed you're doing XYZ. And even though I have an idea of what I think it looks like they're going through, I want to
Mhm.
hear them say how they're processing it.
Mhm.
Because like I said earlier, when we have our strengths or whatever, because our brains think a certain way, sometimes we tend to just assume everyone else is
Mm.
processing the world
Yeah.
and thinking that same way. And
Yeah.
so oftentimes just sitting down with someone and hearing like, oh, no, you're not, like, I'm seeing it from the outside this way, and you're actually like, maybe you are actually processing it in a very healthy way. And you looking healthy is like you being peaceful and you being more
Yes. Yeah.
relaxed. And
Mhm.
sometimes me in my healthiest state, I'm
Mhm.
like very excitable and I'm like outgoing. So maybe I'm projecting that on you and thinking, ooh, maybe she's not being really resilient right now. Like maybe she's really struggling.
Mhm.
But actually, this is a sign of your peace and your
Of
resilience
your
and you,
piece. Yeah.
yeah. So to say like with competition, yeah, I guess it's my, is this okay to say? It's my weakest strength, as in like it is the
Yes,
area that I realize
absolutely.
it
Yes.
can sometimes be a big thorn because I do either way compare myself to others from time to time. And I'm
Mhm.
just like,
Yeah.
ooh, I feel like they're handling this so much better. But like I said, you just, if
I'm
you move
so
that
glad you
away and you
brought this
realize,
up. Yeah. I'm
good,
so glad you brought this up.
good.
No, because so I do a lot of coaching for women, but people in general for, career readiness, writing their resumes, preparing for interviews, because I really do feel that in that space, knowing your strengths allows clarity, confidence, moving forward towards the direction, future jobs that you want. And, often that question comes up, what's your biggest strength? Tell me your biggest weakness. And
Mhm,
it can be the same. It could be the same where it's like when your competition is showing up for you
mhm.
and it's showing up in a way that is like lighting the path, but it also could be your biggest weakness. And that is, the same. I know I shared with you, like, positivity is mine. Positivity is one of my top 5 strengths. It is something that people seek me out for. It can also be my weakness, right? And it could seem that people sometimes think I too am delusional or not sincere because I'm celebrating things that they don't understand why anybody would celebrate something so small, right? So I think, yeah, as we have to be honest, and I think that's, naming it is a start. But the strength work, why I think it's so important, is because the claiming part allows clarity, it allows confidence, it
Yes.
allows you to start aiming with intention. That's your own intention, not somebody else's, but that's your own. And so, as you've been, trying to tame your competition to not do those comparisons, I am curious though how your strengths are pairing together. You've done naming, you've done claiming. Like, what are you aiming your strengths at for 2026? Where are you going?
I am so excited for this year because I think a lot of
Good.
it is I am aiming, like I said earlier, I have a little bit of Delulu faith, but I love it. I love it. I feel like the word Delulu in pop culture lately and faith are actually very they complement each other because it's like, what
Yeah.
is faith other than like this irrational belief? Like you are believing beyond the facts in front of you in a healthy way, right? Like we don't want to like
Yeah.
get too crazy. There's always
Mm-hmm.
balance.
Yeah,
And that's
yeah.
why I surround myself with wisdom. And,
Mm-hmm.
I have an older sister who will keep me in check just like that. But this year, I am so excited. I've been inspired, honestly, by my online community. I've gotten really into
Mm-hmm.
threads.
Okay.
Because it just feels like an ongoing conversation with people where you can just like
Mm-hmm.
talk and put random thoughts like, oh, it's sunny today. Is everyone in the area going out on a walk, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But on Threads a few weeks ago, before this year started, I saw someone post. They are a content creator, and I think they're also a
Mm-hmm.
speaker. And they said they are working on getting to 1,000 rejections. And I thought that's so
Oh.
interesting. And she was pitching herself and she said, I have only sent out my first couple hundred pitches and I've already gotten 6 yeses and 4 maybes. And so what that
Mm-hmm.
tells me is that I wasn't like putting myself out there enough leading up to where I am
Yeah.
right now. And so in my achieverness,
Yeah.
in my communication, strength, and also in my competition, like I said, me competing against me, I'm just realizing not that I was playing it safe in the past, because I do think
Mm,
I constantly push myself. I just think this is
mm,
the natural next progression level. And
mm-hmm.
so a lot of what I'm looking for in my business this year is actually pushing myself to put myself more into spaces like intentionally, and
Mm-hmm.
recognizing that not everything is going to be a yes. I do actually want to get to my 1,000 rejections, because I think
Yeah.
that is a more achievable goal, right? Like I can't say I'm going to get 1,000 speaking invitations or workshops or
Mm-hmm.
professional developments that I'm going to do this year, but I can say I can try 1,000 times. And so
Yeah.
that is definitely one of my goals, professionally. Personally, this is actually a very like a personal goal, but I'm very excited to, I feel like just by saying it, now I really got to do it, even though it's going to be on my vision board. So 9 or 10 years ago, I used to be a very avid runner. And
Okay.
depending on who you talk to in the running community, I was a slow runner or a fast runner. Like, I don't know. I averaged a 10 or 11-minute mile, but I was happily
Yeah.
chugging along. And
Yeah.
I remember how I started as a runner. It was so funny. It was years and years ago, even before 10 years ago, like maybe 15 or
Mm-hmm.
20 years ago, when I actually started running pretty consistently. It was because I was working as a teenager and in my early 20s in a health club in a gym.
Mm-hmm.
And I would read Runner's World magazine every single day. And this was years before, every day I was on shift. You could just read magazines
Yeah.
while people were checking into the gym. And this was well before I ever read Atomic Habits. But when I was reading Runner's World, I'll connect Atomic Habits to what I internalized from reading Runner's World,
Mm-hmm.
is one day I read an article by one of the editors, and he said, when are you a runner? As soon as you call yourself a runner. And so I
Mm-hmm.
started calling myself a runner, even though at the time I couldn't
Mm-hmm.
even run half a mile at like a 15-minute
Mm-hmm.
mile pace. I couldn't run for 5 minutes without, being out of breath. And I
Yeah.
just started calling myself a runner. And very quickly, within less than a year, I ran my first 5K. Shortly after that, I ran my first 10K. And then
Yeah.
about 10 years ago, progressing through the years of running, I had ran my first half marathon, but that was like almost a
Yeah.
decade ago now.
Yeah.
And so at the end of last year, I started dipping my toes back into running. And I was so nervous at first, because tying it back into Atomic Habits that I mentioned earlier, if you've ever read the book Atomic Habits by
Yes,
James Clear,
absolutely. Yeah.
yes,
Stack
he's
those habits.
incredible. Stack the
Yep.
habits. And he talks a lot about how our habits are rooted in our identity. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's why it made sense once I read that book. I'm like, oh, that's why I became a
Mm-hmm.
runner all those years ago. I started calling myself a runner. So I've already
Mm-hmm.
changed like my bios on social media into like
Yes.
speaker, runner. And it's so funny
Runner.
because I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, I can't even run a 15-minute mile right now. Am I
I
a runner? But
love
you know what?
this.
They
I love
say you're
this.
lapping everyone on the couch like you're a runner if you're running and trying,
Yeah.
whether you're walking, running, whatever. But so my goal, all that to say, my personal goal or competition this year with myself is to do 12 races. And it's not 12 half marathons. It's like
Mm-hmm.
5Ks, 1K if it's a
Whatever. Yeah.
miler. I just want to
Bimbo,
sign up
I'm
for
a
12
runner
races.
too. I'm a runner too. Let's sign up for some of the same ones.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Because I will, oh my goodness, I would
Yes, let's do
totally
it.
travel for a run. I love
Yes.
it. Yes. Let's do
All
it.
right. So put me on your vision board with you
No, I'm
running. So we're
serious.
gonna
I
do
was going
it.
to say, I will hold you to it.
I
Let's
know,
do it. Let's do it. If you're
I'm
willing
waiting
to
for a
like,
text right after this with the date and time of like when we're running.
I will find
Yes.
it. I will find it
Yes.
for sure. For sure.
Oh my
Yes.
gosh. Well, yeah, I don't want to push the mental load of planning off. I know you already have it planned by the time we get off this
Yeah.
call, but just know I'm up for helping to plan that too. Yeah,
Yeah.
and so actually what you're saying, I really so it leads into the next question I had for you, which is what are your how do your strengths ever cue you? Like, can you ever figure out, like, as you're deciding to
Mm.
push forward or step back? Because I feel like that's a big part of the balance between grit, toxic resilience is knowing like when to push and when to step back. And like I know for me, I have a couple of my top 5 that really are loud when I need to step back. And I'm just curious, like, what are your cues to action to step back or push forward?
So actually, that is such a great question that ties in with some shifts I've actually made in the last week or two in my business.
Mhm.
So last year I feel like a lot more control over my schedule from day to day. The work
Mm.
was a lot more spread out. And I didn't have to, have a specific time every single day I was up at 6. Like my schedule
Mhm.
varied. Sometimes I had later evenings. So, my day would shift. Going into this year, as last year was ending and going into this year, I found my schedule and just work is ramping up, whether it's contract work I'm doing or work I'm doing specifically for my speaking. I have found that I needed a little bit more structure. And so
Mhm.
my strength of achiever started actually having a little bit of tension in it, because the achiever in
Mhm.
me wants to, if someone gives me a task to do and I can do it in less than 5 minutes or 30 minutes or an hour, I want to
Mhm.
do it that day. Even
Yeah.
though I know, and even though I teach,
Yeah.
and even though I teach with burnout prevention and burnout recovery, I teach how to like organize your tasks so that you are clear about what is urgent and important, what's just
Mhm.
important, but you can schedule for later, what is neither
Mhm.
urgent or important and is just a nice to have, right? So I know the matrix, it's called the Eisenhower matrix. I know
Mhm.
how to organize your tasks so that you don't burn out. Even
Yeah.
if you have an extra hour in your day, give that
Yeah.
extra hour back to yourself. Like we're not machines, right?
Yeah.
So one way I have actually been helping my achiever self is a way I've shifted organizing what I do this year. And we'll see. I'm very new into it, but so far I have just been living my best life, and it's actually lifted
Yeah.
a lot of burden off of me. So before, the way I organize my tasks is I have a physical planner. It's sitting right next to me on my desk. I have
Mhm.
I can actually show it because it's so cute. I'm going to show it. It's probably going to be backwards. I'm going to show the cover. It's so cute. Oh, I hope it's not
Oh
too
my
blurry because I
gosh,
blurred my
that's
background. Yeah, I
precious.
like personalize it. And so it's got like pictures of me and and my husband, because I'm just
That's
such a dork. But it's like,
precious.
you got to take the pictures off your phone and put
Yeah.
them somewhere, because we don't print
Yeah.
pictures anymore like we did years ago. But so I always still use my physical planner. That has remained.
Mhm.
I've kept that from, like, honestly, when I was like in third grade and they first gave us a planner to write down our homework. I don't think I've ever broken that tradition. And I got to
Yeah.
work in education, so it just continued.
Yeah.
But so I use my physical planner, which helps me just the day of to write down stuff and have it there.
Mhm.
But before, I was organizing tasks just on a Google document. And so I
Mm.
have a document with tabs on the side that does, split out like my speaking
Mhm.
work, my contract work supporting parents, my contract work
Mhm.
supporting organizations. So I had a document, and the one main page of the document was like, on Monday, you're doing these tasks. On Tuesday, you're doing these tasks.
Yeah.
But it was just kind of there. And I did kind of use
Mhm.
the matrix, but as I've gotten busier, I actually started using, and this is obviously not sponsored, although if Notion wants to sponsor me, I'd
Yeah.
be very happy.
Shout
I've
out.
just started, shout out to Notion. They're so great. I texted, actually, this is the wooer in me and the community person in me. I texted one of my girl chat text groups, and I texted my friends from college. I said, hey guys, I really need to organize my tasks from different sources better.
Mhm.
What do you use? And one of my friends was like, I really love the app Notion. And what it is I have different boards that are like my work for
Mm.
myself, my work for organizations, my work for I'm doing for
Yeah.
parents. And I know this might seem like maybe a small thing to other people, but you can put a deadline on it. And you can like put like, I know it sounds so weird, but I'm such a visual
It's
person.
not.
Like you can put
No, I need
you
it.
can put a deadline, you can put like the
Mhm.
priority, if it's high, medium, low, you can put the effort, and you can like customize all of this. So I
Yeah.
put effort into like a 30-minute or less task, an hour-long task, a half-day task, a full-day task. And when I
Yeah.
tell you, yesterday night, I was tempted to keep working because I just have had a ton of work this week.
Mhm.
And I was talking to my husband, David, and he peeked in and I said, okay, should I be done with work? He said, well, look at your to-do list. Like, is there anything that doing it tonight will, move you any further? And I thought,
Mhm.
now I can clearly see, no, no,
No.
no, no. I am done. I am done for the day. I
Yes.
can like breathe
Yes.
easy. Everything, even for tomorrow, is like lower, medium priority. Like, so for me, that is helping the achiever in me is now, instead of just putting it
Mhm.
on that Google Doc where it's like, oh, someone gave me a task on a Monday, let me do it on a Tuesday. Now I'm like,
Mhm.
someone gave me a task on a Monday. I mean, I've even been scheduling personal stuff where there's a few friends who want to like connect on a phone call and maybe go out to
Yeah.
coffee. And now I've been able to tell them, hey, I am putting a reminder to reach out to you the last week of January, because January is a big month where I'm just setting
Yeah.
up systems to get on the right rhythm. But I haven't forgotten about you. And now it's in my Notion. And I
Yeah.
know
And this
end of
is
January, I'm texting
exactly
them.
like going back to where you like people are just as important as the work you do, right? Because in
Yes.
doing that, that means when you show up for coffee at that last week of January, you're going to be present, you're going to be locked in,
Mhm.
you're going to be rested, like all
Yes.
of the things. So, yeah, grit. That is a grit move right there, a gritty move right
Yes.
there. All
Yes.
right. Well, I want to be respectful of your time because I could keep this going, but I am going to ask one last question of you. What
Yes.
advice would you give women who are strong, capable, resilient? They're just tired. They're
Hmm.
just tired. They're just exhausted. What advice would you give them?
I will give them advice in the form of a book recommendation and a podcast recommendation.
Okay.
So when I was really going through it, a little over a year ago, as I was making the transition from working for someone else into doing my business full time, working for myself, I
Mhm.
read a book called Try Softer by Andi
Mhm.
Kolber.
Okay.
She is a licensed mental health counselor, and she's also a speaker, and she has done a lot of podcast interviews. But I loved that book because even though I've done a lot of research on burnout and burnout prevention and burnout recovery, we have this concept in resilience and in
Mhm.
grit and in, hanging in there, that what resilience and grit and hanging in there looks like is trying harder. And I
Mhm.
loved that her book gave language to the thought that sometimes the solution to the difficult problem you're facing is not pushing harder, is not working longer hours like I was striving to do
Mhm.
last night, but sometimes the solution is actually to stop, refresh, get restored
Mhm.
yourself, give yourself the space and time to reset. And then
Mhm.
and then in trying softer, you actually move through what it is you're trying to face better, because you stop and you say, okay, what is actually essential in what's being asked of me? So I would recommend, if you're, on the brink of burnout, maybe not physically reading the book, listen to the audiobook, like
Mhm.
however you can access it, but just start to think about, what does trying softer look like for you? And the
For
author
you.
gives a lot of
Yeah.
examples, but I know,
Okay.
like I said, in my own life, often it just looks like cutting off work at 4 or 5 instead of
Mhm.
going deep into the night, because I could work until 10 or 11 every day. Like, that's just the
Yeah.
achiever in me. I have to, yeah. And then when you work for yourself,
Yeah.
it's even worse, right? So, like,
Yeah.
I
It
have to
never ends.
constantly,
It never ends.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So that would be my recommendation, is if you have the space or the capacity at this time to read that book, great. If you have less capacity, there is a podcast I love, which is actually also based on a book. It's called The Lazy Genius Podcast by Kendra
Mhm.
Adachi. She is fantastic. She has a book called The Lazy Genius Way, but I'm not going to recommend too many books, because if you're overwhelmed, you don't need another book. But her podcast, even if you
Mhm.
just listen to one 20 or 30-minute episode, I
Mhm.
love her podcast, because her whole tagline in her book and her podcast and her website and her movement is that she encourages women and people in general to be a genius about what matters and lazy about what
Mm.
doesn't. And I
Mm.
think that is what resilience is. I think it is showing up to your
Yes.
life and being genius about the relationships that matter, the work that matters to you, the things that keep you up at night, showing up authentically for that cause that has a fire in your heart, like
Yeah.
being a genius about that, but being lazy about, like, I don't know, making your bed every morning. Actually, my husband and I fight about that all the time, because I'm like, people who make their bed every morning, I'm just been indoctrinated. The achiever in me is like, people who make their bed every morning are more successful. But honestly, that's something you can be lazy about. Like, that is not
Yeah.
a thing that is going to move the needle, overall.
Mhm. Yeah.
So yes, the Lazy Genius podcast,
Mm.
try softer. But also, in light of all of that, my encouragement to whoever is struggling is just something I've discovered recently in my own personal life. If you feel like you're struggling, if you feel like you're drowning, but if you at least have one friend or family member that you feel like you are in good relationship with, this is a safe space, I would
Mhm.
just open my mouth and talk to that person and share with them what you're going through, because I personally have just had outpouring of love and support, as I've been
Mm,
just sharing more about my own personal struggles recently, even
mhm.
just on social media with internet
Yeah.
strangers. And I have just been so floored by the fact that we're all
Yeah.
going through so much. And if we
Yeah.
just open our mouth and say, hey, I'm not perfect, I'm not, I'm struggling,
Mhm.
you would be surprised at how many other people are in the same boat. So
Yeah.
keep on going, but also keep going softly because you're okay.
Oh,
It's okay to
I love
struggle.
that. Well, I'm going to be a genius at continuing to provide a space for women to have a voice. And it was such an honor to get to say hello to you today and your strengths. And yeah, I have a feeling that we might have to have you back in 2026. So we'll keep in touch. We're going to be running together. So all of this is going to be good. But thank you so much for your time. And yeah, happy 2026. And I can't wait to celebrate all the things you achieve and the moments where you decide to step back and do things a little bit softer.
Yes. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
having me. This has been such a pleasure, and I'm so honored to have been on today.
Yay. All right. Okay.